Jimi Hendrix is suddenly back in the spotlight, and people can't stop talking about it. This is the first time in more than 50 years that Washington State has acknowledged what music fans have known all along. Something huge is happening on stages across America, and music stars are fighting to be a part of it. One legend is even ending his retirement to join in. The internet is going crazy over what's happening right now about Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was born on November 27, 1942 in Seattle. Ole and Lucille were his parents. They had a lot of money problems and fought a lot. Lucille was only 17 years old when Jimi was born. Ole was in the military in Alabama and wasn't allowed to come home. When he asked for leave, he was locked up for over a month. Jimi's early life was full of chaos because both of his parents drank a lot and their home was unstable. 4 of his siblings were taken by the state and put in foster care for a short time. Jimi was sent to live with a family friend in California in 1945. When Al came back from the military, he took Jimi back to Alabama. In 1951, Al and Lucille got a divorce in Seattle. Ole then took custody of Jimi and his younger brother Leon. When Lucille died of liver disease in 1958, Jimi was 15 years old. Ole didn't let the boys go to the funeral. Instead, he gave them whiskey and said, "This is how men deal with loss." At that time, Jimi found comfort in music. He had always been interested in it, and at school he used to carry a broom around and play it like a guitar. A social worker saw him and asked if the school could buy him a guitar, but nothing happened. When Jimi was 15, he was helping his dad clean out a house and found a broken ukulele with only one string. The woman who lived there told him he could keep it. Jimi learned to play by listening to Elvis Presley songs. After his mother died, Al finally bought him a real guitar. It became his escape. He listened to blues and early rock music and learned on his own. He dropped out of Garfield High School at age 17 and became a musician. He played with local bands like the Rocking Kings and the Velvetones, had no steady job and often struggled for money. Sometimes he slept in abandoned cars, but he kept playing. He paid close attention to other musicians, and one of them, Butch Snipes, played the guitar with his teeth. Jimi copied this move and made it part of his act. In 1961, when he was 19, Jimi was arrested for riding in a stolen car and spent a week in jail. He was given the option of going to prison or joining the army, and he chose to join the 101st Airborne Division. Hendrix was drawn to the Screaming Eagles because of their reputation, that fought in World War II during the D-Day landings. Hendrix started basic training at Fort Ord in California in August 1961. By August 1962, he was done with training and was sent to Fort Campbell in Kentucky as a private. Hendrix didn't like the structure or the rules of Army life. He wrote letters to his father about how much he hated it. But his Red Dane electro guitar, which he named Betty Jean, kept him going. He played it whenever he could at Fort Campbell. Campbell Ricks met another soldier named Billy Cox who played bass. They became fast friends through music and started playing together in a band called the King Casuals. They started playing around the base and sometimes in nearby towns while Ricks was still in uniform. In 1962, Ricks's time in the Army ended after only 13 months. The official reason was an ankle injury he got during his 26th parachute jump, but other records show there were other reasons. He skipped bed checks, slept during shifts, failed shooting drills, and did poorly in physical training. Some reports even said he showed homosexual tendencies, which at the time could lead to discharge. Despite all of this, Ricks was given an honorable discharge. After leaving the Army, he and Billy Cox moved to Clarksville, Tennessee, because they wanted to keep making music. They kept the name King Casuals and started playing in small clubs, which is where Ricks started to develop his own style. He played a right-handed guitar. He started playing the guitar backwards and with his teeth because he was left-handed. The pressure to entertain was high. Ricks once said, "Down there you have to play with your teeth or else you get shot." This meant that the audience wanted more than just skill. They wanted a show, and if you didn't stand out, you didn't get asked back. Some band leaders didn't like his flashy style and thought he was trying to steal the show, but Hendrix kept pushing his style. He played backup guitar on the Chitlin Circuit from 1962 to 1965. The Chitlin Circuit was a group of venues across the South, Midwest, and East Coast where black musicians could perform during segregation. The conditions were bad and the pay was often low or non-existent. Bobby Rush, who also played the circuit, said that they were sometimes paid in food. In January 1964, Jimi Hendrix felt stuck. He had spent years playing behind other artists, following their rules and living under their spotlight. He wanted more control over his own life. He wanted to focus on his music and career, so he quit the backup gigs and moved into the Hotel Teresa in Harlem. That's where he met Lithafane Prigon, who was part of the Harlem music scene and became his girlfriend. She also gave him a place to stay, supported him and pushed him to keep going. Around the same time he met Arthur and Albert Allen, who were twin brothers with deep roots in Harlem's clubs. He started playing around the city in small venues and trying to get gigs with different bands. In February 1964 he competed in an amateur night contest at the Apollo Theater and won first place. This gave him confidence and showed that he could play for an audience on his own. Soon after, a contact from the Joe Tex Band helped him get an audition with Ronnie Ely. He impressed Ely and was offered a job as the guitarist for the Ely Brothers backing band, which he took right away. This was a big step forward. In March 1964, Hendrix recorded his first studio track, a two-part single called Testify with the Ely Brothers. Released in June but didn't chart, but it was a start in May. He played guitar on Don Cobb's Mercy Mercy, which came out in August and reached number 35 on the Billboard chart. Hendrix toured with the Elys for most of 1964, but by October he was sick of playing the same set every night and wanted something different, so he quit the band. Soon after, he joined Little Richard's touring group The Upsetters in February 1965, and they went to Los Angeles, where he recorded a single with Little Richard called I Don't Know What You Got But It's Got Me, was written by Don Cove and released by VJ Records. It only made it to number 92 on the charts and stayed there for 1 week. By this time, Little Richard's fame was fading. While staying at the Willocks Hotel in Hollywood, Hendrix met a singer named Rosa Lee Brooks. Brooks asked him to play guitar on her single, My Diary and UT, both of which were written by Arthur Lee. Harris played guitar on both tracks and even met Lee during the session, and the two became friends. Lee's band Love later gained a lot of fans, including Rix. In July 1965, Rix made his first TV appearance on Nashville's WLAC-TV's Night Train, where he played with Little Richard's band and backed up vocalists Buddy and Stacy on the song Shotgun. That clip is now the earliest known video of Rix performing live, but things weren't going well with Little Richard. He liked to show off on stage, wore flashy clothes and had a style that didn't fit with Richard's image. Richard's brother Robert fired Rix from the band on July 27, 1965. That same month, Rix signed his first recording contract with Juggy Murray at Sue Records and a management company called Copa. He then briefly joined the Ely Brothers and recorded another single, Move Over and Let Me Dance, with Have You Ever Been Disappointed as the B-side. Later that same year, Rix met Curtis Knight at a hotel. Knight led an R&B band called The Squire, and Rix joined them and stayed with them for 8 months. Rix had already signed a 2-year deal with Sue Record on October 15, 1965. He also signed a 3-year deal with a man named Ed Chalpin. The 3-year deal with Chalpin didn't last, but the partnership did, and it caused problems for Rix later in his career while playing with Curtis Knight and the Squires. Rix also worked with other artists. He toured with Joey D and the Starlighter, recorded with King Curtis and played with King Curtis. Help Me, a single by Ray Sharp, had 2 parts. In 1966, Rix got his first songwriting credits. He wrote 2 instrumentals called Hornets' Nest and Knock Yourself Out. Both were released as singles by Curtis Knight and the Squires. By 1966, Rix was ready to leave the R&B scene, so he moved to Greenwich Village in New York. The area was full of artists, musicians, and new ideas. He found work playing at Cafe Who on McDougal Street and started a new band. Randy California, who later formed the band Spirit, was in a band called Jimmy James and the Blue Flames. The Blue Flames played all over New York, and Rix used those gigs to shape his sound. He started trying out new styles and stage moves in September 1966. The band played some of their last shows together at Cafe Au Go in Manhattan, where they were the backup singers for a singer named John Hammond. On September 24, 1966, Jimi Hendrix arrived at London Airport with almost nothing. He had a change of clothes but nothing else. He went to London with hair curlers, a guitar and 40 borrowed dollars. The airport had just been renamed Heathrow, and Harris didn't know it yet, but this trip would change his life. Earlier that summer he had been playing small gigs in New York City under the name Jimmy James. One night, former Animals bassist Chas Chandler saw him perform at Café Wa in Greenwich Village. Chandler was looking for new talent, and when he saw Hendrix play, he knew he had found something special. 12 days after Jimi arrived in London, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Chandler quickly hired musicians and met Noel Reading at an audition for the new Animals. Jimi liked how Reading understood blues progression and his unique hairstyle for the drummer Chandler called Mitch Mitchell. Mitchell had just been fired from Georgie fame and the Blue Flames, and he and Jimi connected over their love of rhythm and blues. Chandler also helped create Jimi's image by suggesting that the name be spelled Jimmy instead of Jimmy, which made it look different. The band started playing right away, and within a week they joined French singer Johnny Hallyday on a 4-show tour of France on October 23. They recorded their first single, Hey Joe, at Delane Lee's studios in London, less than a month after Jimi moved there. Recording wasn't easy though, because their loud Marshall amps messed up the studio equipment, and Jimi was also nervous about his singing. The B-side of the single, Stone Free, was recorded on November 2nd, and it was the first original song. Chandler encouraged Jimi to write the song with the band so Jimi could make money through publishing rights. Even though they were talented, it was hard to get a record deal. Eventually, The Who's managers Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp signed them to their new label Track Records, even though Track was still young. The first single, Hey Joe, came out on Polydor on December 16, 1966, and went to number 41 on the UK charts. It later reached number 6 and stayed there for 10 weeks. Jimi also appeared on TV shows like Ready Steady just a few months before. He was a backup guitarist in small New York clubs. Now that he was becoming a star, Chas Chandler had a plan to make sure that the right people saw Hendrix perform on October 1, 1966, just a week after Jimi got there. Chandler took him to London Polytechnic, where Cream was playing, and Jimi asked if he could join them on stage. They said yes, and he played Killing Floor by Howlin' Wolf, which shocked the crowd. Eric Clapton was backstage after the song shocked, and in the middle of November, Chandler lit a cigarette and told Chandler, "You never told me he was that good." By this time, Jimi was playing shows at Bag O'Neill's Club, and stars like Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Mick Jagger, Jeff Beck, Pete Townsend and Brian Jones were there. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, and Kevin Eyes remembered that they were all swearing in shock. Around this time, Jimi moved into 34 Montague Square with his girlfriend Kathy Etchingham. The flat was owned by Ringo Starr Chandler, who lived there with his girlfriend. Hendrix played at prestigious clubs like the Scotch of St. James near Buckingham Palace, where the Beatles and the Rolling Stones had their own tables. Chandler had accomplished his goal of making Hendrix the most talked about musician in London in just 2 months, but things did not go perfectly. During the first studio sessions for Hey Joe, Chandler told Jimi to turn down his amps, which caused a fight. Jimi had a major meltdown and yelled that he couldn't work there, and that he might as well go back to New York. Chandler stayed calm. He had just come from the visa office with Jimi's passport and return flight ticket in his pocket. He put them on the mixing desk and told him, "Go on then off back to America." He said something like "piss off," and Jimi laughed and said, "All right, you called my bluff." That set the tone for how they would work together from then on. Jimi wanted freedom, and Chandler gave it to him while also making sure things stayed on track. The real turning point came on June 18, 1967, at the Monterey Pop Festival. It was a warm night, and Hendrix was a big star in London but not so much in the US. He knew this performance could change everything. Prior to his performance, Jimi had to do something even bigger. He asked a stagehand for lighter fluid and hid it behind his amplifier. Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones introduced him to the crowd. Jimi ended his set with Wild Thing,
He got down on his knees, did a flip with his guitar, and said into the microphone, "I'm going to sacrifice something I really love, man." Then he put lighter fluid on his Stratocaster, set it on fire, smashed it 7 times and threw the burning pieces into the crowd. Photographer Ed Carve caught the moment, and the picture went on to become one of the most famous in rock history. That night made Rix a star in his own country music, and music writer Robert Christgau later said that this performance introduced a guitar style so powerful and new that no one has matched it since. Jimi's first album, Are You Experienced?, also made waves when it came out in the UK on May 12, 1967, and stayed on the British after 33 weeks on the charts, and reaching number 2 just behind Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The UK version didn't have Purple Haze, Hey Joe, or The Wind Cries Mary. Instead, it had songs like Red House, which showed Hendrix' blues roots. Jimi didn't like the UK album cover, so on August 23, 1967, Reprise Records released a new version of the album in the US. It had different songs and new psychedelic cover art by Carl Ferris. This version included the hit singles like Red House, Remember, and Can You See Me, Purple Haze, but they were taken off the album. It was a huge hit on underground FM radio, and it went to number 5 on the Billboard album chart and stayed there for 106 weeks, with 76 of those weeks in the top 40. It also went to number 10 on the Billboard R&B chart and stayed there for 70 weeks. To promote the album, Repetition spent $20,000, which was a lot of money in 1968, when Jimi Hendrix was at the height of his fame. His only album to reach number 1 on the Billboard charts was Electric Ladyland, which came out on October 16. It was a double album, and the first one he fully produced himself. Songs like Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Crosstown Traffic, and his cover of Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower showed how far his music had come. His version of Watchtower became his only top 20 hit on the Billboard Hot 100, and Dylan himself said that Rix found things in the song that no one else would have thought of. The album was also a sign of growing tension between Jimi and Rix. He stopped working with Chas Chandler, the man who brought him to England in the first place, because he wanted more control. He became so focused on the sound that he often played bass himself instead of Noel Reading. His need to be perfect was getting the best of him. In 1968, he and his manager Michael Jeffrey bought the Old Generation Club in Greenwich Village. At first they planned to turn it back into a music venue, but then they saw that Jimi was spending almost $300,000 a year on studio time, so they decided to build their own studio instead. They called it for Jimi's style. Architect John Stoic made the Electric Lady Studio. The rooms didn't have sharp corners. There were round windows, soft lights, and colorful murals. Everything was supposed to feel creative and calm, but the project ran into problems. Jimi was making up to $100,000 per show at places like Madison Square Garden, but that wasn't enough. The studio took twice as long to finish and cost almost $1 million by the end of 1970. On June 15, 1970, Jimi played there for the first time, jamming with Steve Winwood and Chris Wood. Because of traffic, he recorded Nightbird Flying the next day. On August 25, the studio officially opened, but Jimi had already left for England. He never came back, and he never saw the finished studio again. The end of the Jimi Hendrix experience came earlier that summer, on June 29, 1969, when they played their last show at the Denver Pop Festival. The festival took place at Mile High Stadium over 3 days, and tickets cost $6 per day, or $15 for the whole weekend. It featured acts like Joe Cocker and Creedence Clearwater Revival. That day, Jimi held a saffet. At a press conference, he introduced Billy Cox as his new bassist. Cox was a friend from the Army. Noel Reading and Mitch Mitchell hadn't been told that the band was breaking up. During their set, about 2,500 people who couldn't get into the stadium started fighting with police, who fired tear gas into the stadium to try to calm them down. Jimi and the band had to run off stage, but they got away in a panel van, which was quickly surrounded by scared fans, and the roof started to cave in. Mitch Mitchell later said that they thought they were going to lose. The next day, Noel Reading flew back to England, ending the original experience. Later that summer, Jimi played Woodstock. He was supposed to close the show on August 17, 1969, but the event ran late, so he didn't take the stage until 8 a.m. About 30,000 of the 400,000 people who had come to Woodstock were still there on Monday, August 18th. There was a fight backstage about whether Jimi should play the Star-Spangled Banner. Michael Jeffrey didn't want him to because he said the song had caused a riot in Dallas and he was afraid it would do it again. But after Jeffrey left, music promoter Jerry Morrison told Jimi to do it anyway. Jimi walked on stage and played the anthem in a way that no one had heard before. His guitar made the sounds of bombs, sirens, and screams. It was loud. The music was strange and memorable, and some people thought it was political, but Jimi later said it wasn't. He was just playing what he felt. In 1966, Jimi Hendrix took LSD for the first time, and his music started to sound like nothing anyone had heard before, according to his girlfriend Kathy Etchingham. Jimi started having visions and wanted to turn them into music, but most of the time he couldn't explain them because they didn't make sense. He wasn't afraid to go through new doors when he played guitar. By 1967, he was taking LSD during performances at the Monterey Pop Festival. He was high on LSD when he walked on stage that night and set his guitar on fire. It shocked the crowd and made headlines around the world, but it wasn't just for show. It was a moment that showed how far he was willing to go because he was after something bigger than music. By the late 1960s, LSD had become a regular part of. He used drugs like marijuana, hashish, amphetamines, and cocaine all the time. These drugs were always with him on tour and changed the sound of his music. Songs like Purple Haze and 1983, A Merman I Should Turn were inspired by his drug life. Biographer Charles Cross said that Jimi was one of the few stars who was so connected to the drug culture. His music became a reflection of the psychedelic world he lived in, but there was another side of him that not many people saw. Harris had a serious alcohol problem. People who knew him well said he became angry, and there was no longer any peace and calm. One of the worst things that happened to him was when he was drunk and hit his girlfriend Carmen Barrero with a vodka bottle, giving her a cut above the eye that needed stitches. He started drinking early in July 1962 after leaving the army, and spent almost all of his $400 savings on one night of drinking. He once said that people told him he was stupid when he drank, but as he became more famous, the problem got worse. He was arrested several times during tours for people who knew him well said that alcohol brought out a different side in him. One person called it the biggest curse of his life because it caused mood swings and sometimes violent outbursts that didn't match the public image people saw on stage. Then there was the arrest in Toronto on May 3, 1969. When Rix arrived at Toronto International Airport, customs officers stopped him and found small amounts of heroin and hashish in his bag. He was arrested at 1:30 p.m. After tests proved the drugs were real, he was freed later that same day on $10,000 bail. That night he played a concert at Maple Leaf Gardens during Red House, but he changed the lyrics to say, "Soon as I get out of jail, I want to see her." The charges were serious. On May 5th, he was charged with 2 counts of drug possession, each of which carried a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. His bandmates Noel Reading and Mitch Mitchell later said they had been told about a planned bust the day before and thought someone had planted the drugs for the purpose of a surprise arrest. In December 1969, Rix had to cut his hair and wear a suit for his trial, which lasted 3 days and 8 hours of deliberation. When he was found not guilty, he smiled, put up a peace sign and said, "Canada has given me the best Christmas present I ever had." But freedom didn't bring peace. On September 3, 1970, while touring Europe, Jimi Hendrix arrived in Gothenburg, Sweden, and was greeted by Eva Sundquist. She said that he had fathered her son James, who was born on January 5, 1970, and that she and James had been together at his Stockholm concert in January 1969. This wasn't the first time someone made a claim like this, but the timing made it worse. Hendrix was already tired, high on drugs, and emotionally drained. That night's concert was a mess. He forgot the words and wandered from song to song. Audience members said he looked totally out of it. 2 weeks later, on September 17th, Rix was with his girlfriend Monica Danneman. They went to a party and then drank wine at her flat in the Summer End Hotel in London. They got back around 3 a.m. Monica later said that they talked until about 700 a.m. and then Jimmy took 9 Vesper sleeping pills, which is 18 times the standard dose. The drug was so strong that it was later banned, and in many countries, Rix had been sick in the days before he died. He was tired and probably had the flu. He was also losing trust in the people around him and felt trapped by the music business and unsure about his future. He was only 27 years old, which put him in the tragic 27 Club with Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Brian Jones, and later Curtis. An ambulance was called to the hotel at 11:18 a.m. on September 18, 1970. When it arrived 9 minutes later, the door was open and the gas fire was still going. Harris was lying in bed, covered in vomit. His airways were completely blocked. Monica wasn't there, even though she later said she never left his side. An ambulance worker named Reggie Jones said it was one of the worst scenes he had ever seen. The vomit was dark, almost black, and soaked through the pillow. Harris was taken to Sunsund. At 12:45 p.m., he was pronounced dead at St. Mary's Hospital after doctors tried to revive him, but it was too late. There were still questions. Surgeon John Bannister said that Rix's lungs and stomach were filled with red wine. He thought Rix drowned either at the hotel or on the way to the hospital, but toxicology reports showed that he had very little alcohol in his system. In 1992, new questions led to a private investigation. Scotland Yard reopened the case and interviewed everyone involved. In 1993, they closed the case again because there were still no clear answers. Jimi Hendrix is back in the news in 2025. Even though he died more than 50 years ago, his legacy is still strong. On March 18, 2025, the state of Washington gave him the Medal of Merit, which is the highest award the state can give to a civilian. The ceremony took place at the Capitol building in Olympia, and Governor Bob Ferguson, Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, and Secretary of State Steve Hobbs gave the award to Rix's family and to the Museum of Pop Culture, which has a permanent exhibit about him. The medal was given to honor Rix for his influence in Washington and around the world. Governor Ferguson called him one of the most important guitarists of all time, saying that Rix's influence went beyond Washington and helped shape modern music. While this honor was happening in Olympia, the Experience Hendrix tour returned to the road after a 5-year break due to the pandemic. The tour travels across North America with a group of musicians. They play Rix's songs and honor his work tonight, March 21st, at the Chicago Theater. The show is part of a 33-day tour that goes to major cities across the United States. The tour is full of big names: Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Zakk Wylde, known from Pantera and Black Label Society, Eric Johnson, Marcus King, Devin Allman, Samantha Fish, and Chris Kingfish Ingram are all performing. Each artist brings their own sound, but they all come together to honor Hendrix music. Hendrix is set to appear at the last show on April 12th. The tour will end at the Fox Theater in Atlanta that night, and blues legend Buddy Guy will return to the stage. Guy is 88 years old and retired from touring last year, so this performance is even more special. Buddy Guy shared a message about the event in which he said he still remembers meeting Hendrix at a club in New York in 1968, where they became friends, and he is looking forward to seeing him again. Now he's coming back to perform one last time in honor of Rix. John McDermott is the catalog director for the company, and he recently said that everything they do still has to do with music. He said that Rix is the reason the business exists.